Hello, everybody. My name is Mitchell Scott Lewis, and I'm pleased to be here and to be one of your hosts for this series of webinars we're going to run. The title is US Pluto Return, which is a bit of a misnomer, as you will see as we get deeper into this, because we're dealing with world events, not just United States events. But there are going to be six panelists today, myself, Daniel Fiverson, Chad Harris, Stacy Pizzera, and Kim Marie Wiener, and Steve Wolfson. And each of us are going to give you a perspective on how we see the events that are happening over the next period of time. Some of us will have different opinions about different charts and about how we see the events. And of course, that's part of the purpose of astrological meetings, is to mix up the information, learn a little from each other, see what everybody's perspective is. And eventually, hopefully, we will come to an understanding of the energy that we are working with and how best to use it. You know, before I begin my presentation, I'm a very big fan of Carl Jung's. He was very into astrology, of course. And I'm paraphrasing, but in one of his books, maybe Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, I'm not sure, he said, if there's something wrong with the collective, then there's something wrong with me. And if there's something wrong with me, then there is something wrong with the collective. And again, that's a paraphrase, but his point is well taken. And when I look at astrology, and when I do my posts or webinars or Facebook posts or anything else, and I see an aspect happening, I try to cover what it could mean in your personal life, but also what it means in the collective, because we do work on several levels at the same time. And that's how I feel the energy that we're under right now is affecting us, because while Linda is in Australia and tells us that she has violent weather down there, we all see what's happening in the United States with these terrible storms in Texas, and the great nation of Texas, and its fossil fuel industry, and they have no heat. So we are dealing with issues that are bigger than just the United States. They are world events. But for the purpose of this, many of us are going to focus more on America as a point, not as the entire picture, but as a jumping off point. And as they say these days, how America goes, so goes the world. That may or may not be true in another generation, but it still seems to be very much true today. Okay, so I'm up first, and I'm not going to do a lot of PowerPoints. I'm going to bring up one or two charts. But primarily what I want to deal with here is I want to focus on exactly what this energy implies. Those who follow my work know that I spent a lot of time trading commodities on the mercantile exchange. It was not my first choice. I'm a musician and an astrologer by trade, but it was a job and I did quite well at it, and I made a good living, and I was able to learn some things about astrology that I don't think I ever would have learned if I hadn't been brought into that kind of a circumstance. And one of the things I learned was just how astrology works on the collective. Every day that I went to the floor for many years, I would watch all of the charts, and it's an amazing place. It's like a casino that never closes. And there's coffee and sugar and cocoa and cotton and Deutschmarks and yen and oil and gold, and everything is up there. And by marking the astrological aspects and finding what I feel are the rulers to each of these commodities, I was able to see the change from a day-to-day level, but also on a bigger level. Here, cotton, for example, if there's a drought in India and there's no cotton, well, cotton goes up. If there are floods down south in America and they have a problem producing cotton, cotton goes up. And so I get to see this on a big, broader scale. My point of this is to bring it down to a single planet for the moment, and that's Pluto. Now, in my years on the floor, uh, my job was to figure out how astrology works. This is what they hired me for. Anybody can trade commodities. It doesn't take a genius. Markets go up, you buy it. Markets go down, you sell it. You make a living. But the astrology gave me an extra little tool to work with. And after quite a number of years on the floor, everybody was screaming, oil, what about oil? This is the big thing. We want to know about oil. So I did a lot of research and did a lot of work with my trading partners, and I found that oil, from my point of view, is ruled by the planet Pluto. For one thing, Pluto was discovered in 1930, which happens to be the same year that the University of Texas first gave out a degree in a brand new science called petrol engineering. Now, that obviously, when I'm trading commodities, I looked at 20, 30 years of a commodity, however long I could get, and I saw the motion of the planet and the motion of the commodity. And when they worked accordingly, well, there's your ruler. It's an oversimplification, but I'm not going to get into teaching people how to trade commodities today. What I do want to get into is what Pluto implies. And for one thing, Pluto, in astrological terms, rules things that are hidden or buried under the surface. Pluto rules the underworld. It rules dead things, and it rules things that are transformative. Well, oil is buried underground. We believe that it's dead dinosaurs or some sort of organic material, and nothing has transformed humanity greater than oil, certainly over the last century or so. So it became logical to me that Pluto rules oil. And so as Pluto was getting ready to enter expansive Sagittarius in the early 90s, the mid 90s, I made the prediction repeatedly on radio and in lectures, and I was doing a series of lectures at the Princeton Club, mostly for traders, that oil, which at the time was trading $17 a barrel, was going to go above $100 a barrel. The first year I did the lecture, they all laughed at me. Second year, oil was trading in the 30s. They weren't laughing anymore. Third year, it was trading in the high 50s. You couldn't get a seat. The place was sold out. People were sitting in the hallway saying, what did he say? What did he say? And then eventually it did, in fact, while it journeyed through expansive Sagittarius, go up to $140 a barrel, right before it left Sagittarius and entered restrictive Capricorn. And within a matter of a week or two after it left Sagittarius, it plummeted from $140 a barrel to $40 a barrel. Then it retrograded and went back into Sagittarius. It ran right back up again into the hundreds. And then when it got back into Capricorn, it tumbled one more time. Well, this past winter, we had Saturn conjunct Pluto. Saturn is a restrictive planet. What happened to the price of oil? It went below zero. It cost too much money for the oil companies to hold their oil. So they said to people, if you'll take our oil, we'll pay you. We have no place to put the oil, and we can't keep pumping it out of the ground because we're in a pandemic and the demand has shrunken for many different reasons. But from our point of view, or my point of view, Saturn was conjunct Pluto. Saturn restricted the price of oil, and it went below zero. Never happened before. I'm not sure it will ever happen again, but I'll get to that in a second. So then, of course, it bottoms out at minus $17. I think it was just insane. And it pulls back up again. But ever since Pluto has been in Capricorn, restrictive Capricorn, it has been going sideways. It has not had a real big bull run. And I believe, and I've said for many years, oil is a dying commodity. Now, a lot of people have jumped on that bandwagon. I don't care about blowing my own horn, but just to show you how astrology works. Well, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a generation. Eventually, I'd say within 20 years or so, the only nations that are going to use oil and natural gas and, God forbid, coal as their main source of fuel are going to be third world countries. All of these so-called modernized countries are going to go into wind and thermal. I mean, you can take a pole and stick it into the middle of the ground and create enough heat, if you go deep enough, to heat an entire city. We are also seeing that General Motors and Ford and all the rest of them are jumping on the Tesla, excuse me, bandwagon, and they are all going to have electric cars within a matter of a decade and a half. So we see what's happening to oil. Now, at the moment, we are in the worst, the catastrophe, like we don't have enough to worry about. The weather in America has been just devastating. And what's happened is that Texas, which produces the most oil in, well, actually one of the biggest oil manufacturers in the world, since they opened up certain oil fields in the last couple of years, and their grid collapsed. So why did the grid collapse? Well, Saturn's in square to Uranus. This is an aspect that I know quite well from my studies of the stock market. When Saturn was in opposition to Uranus, the 2008 crash occurred, which I was able to predict more than a year in advance, within a week of its occurrence, because of this aspect and where it fell on the New York Stock Exchange's chart. And I'm going to do all of this in your webinar at some point, and I'll let everybody know. But for now, I just want to get to certain points, and then I'll turn it over to Daniel and to Chad and get their perspective. So we are at a point now where many things in our society are transforming, and they're moving faster than we ever thought would happen. For one thing, we've reached a point where if we don't stop global climate change, as I like to say, we're going to be eating each other, because there's going to be nothing left. And while I'm an optimist, I have a lot of Sagittarius and Jupiter in my chart, and I tend to be optimistic. I don't believe in being a Pollyanna. I think we have some issues that we are dealing with that are massive. And if we don't deal with them and quickly, we're not going to be able to turn this around. Okay, we have a political situation where there is a tremendous tug of war. What does Pluto rule besides everything else? Power struggles. America is in the worst power struggle we have seen, well, since the Civil War. I was watching on CNBC earlier the congressional hearings on GameStop and Robinhood and why all of this occurred. And you could tell that who was a Democrat and who was a Republican by the questions that they were asking or the points they were making. The Democrats believe in regulating things in order to control it and keep it in place. And the Republicans believe in absolutely no regulation. Texas has no regulation. They are not part of the grid. They have no regulation for their oil industry. They have no regulation for anything. And the entire grid collapsed. So now, again, not to make this political. I don't want this to be Republican versus Democrat or any of that. That's for each individual to decide. But my point is that Pluto, this is what we're focusing on. Pluto represents a certain kind of struggle where there may not necessarily be a winner. It's a matter of working through, of transforming our society. And if we don't make certain transformative changes, that's Pluto, this is what we call it, transformative, we are going to be in a lot of trouble. I was going to bring up America's chart, but you know what? I'm going to leave that for Chad and Daniel to do. And I'm not even going to bring up the PowerPoint. I want to just get some of this out now. America's chart is somewhat in question because people have different opinions about exactly when America was born. You know, I mean, the hospital that it was born in, I don't think the clocks are working that well, so the time may be off. But we have a point now where if we don't make these changes and we don't find the right path to take, we're going to be in some serious trouble. And of course, we see some of the trouble now. People ask me all the time about the stock market because this is what I spend a lot of my time doing, and I trade and I help people with their retirement funds and things like that. So what I think we are entering into, because Pluto rules trading accounts. Saturn rules the banks and the housing industry. But Pluto rules all things, it's an eighth house, rules the eighth house, all things that are held jointly together. Well, if you're trading your stocks, you're not trading by yourself. If you're doing that, you're sitting home playing Monopoly alone. You're trading it with millions of other people. All that money is in that group connection. And so if the S&P goes up, it's because millions of people are pushing it up. If it goes down, obviously the same thing. If an individual stock goes up, well, I was lucky enough to be holding AMC. I didn't buy AMC because of Reddit. I had never heard of Reddit as a trading platform, but I believe in post-pandemic stocks. And I think that the movie industry is going to come back. In fact, if you read about China, the movies are exploding there. $375 million for some half-assed movie, because people are starved. And I think AMC is going to go back up. This is not to tell people to go out and buy stocks. So please don't think that I'm hyping certain stocks. But as a result of what they did, I bought AMC at $2. It ran up to $20. I took a look at that and I said I'd be an idiot not to take profits. And I tried to get out. It took an hour and a half for my trade to be filled. Usually on TD Ameritrade, it takes a second. Click it, you're done. Hour and a half to fill it. Because of the manipulation and because of what was happening with AMC and with GameStop and with several other stocks, Nokia. And so all of this is Pluto. All of this is Pluto's energy. And as we delve into America's Pluto return, and again, it's not just America. This is why I brought up Saturn conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. Now, obviously, Saturn has moved into Aquarius, so that conjunct is separated. But Pluto remains in Capricorn. And that's where America's Pluto is. So we are in the process of going through our Pluto return, which will take quite a number of years. Pluto aspects don't happen over a long weekend in the Hamptons. They take a long time to complete. And so we're in the process of it, and it will continue for quite some time. And then eventually we will start to feel the release of that pressure. So for now, all I want to say is the world, not just America, the world is at a point where we are dealing with several aspects astrologically. And I don't separate astrology from life. I think it's a tool that we use. I think it's part of everything that we are doing. And so I use astrology. I'm not one of these astrologers who won't leave their house because Mercury is retrograde. I live my life. I know where all the planets are. I'm obviously aware of the aspects. I've been doing this for decades, but I don't allow it to control me. I try to use it to help me make decisions and choices that I have to make. And so we are at a point now worldwide where weather and climate change, forest fires, the melting of the ice caps. Why do we have the kind of weather we have? Well, because the Arctic is melting. And so the jet stream is going further south and bringing with it this incredibly cold weather that is sweeping through the south of America, which is our breadbasket, so to speak. And we may have a problem with cotton, and we may have a problem with certain food over the next year or so. California, between their droughts and their forest fires, they're also having a problem. The ecology is shifting. And so our food supply is shifting. And the way that we go about dealing with many of these issues has to change, and it has to change soon. We don't have 20 or 30 years to sit back and say, well, let's worry about we'll worry about it later. There's no later. It's now. So again, I'm not sure what my time is, Linda, when I started this, but just to try and tie this up a little bit. All of the charts that we look at, whether it's America's chart or chart of Australia, I'm doing an interview tomorrow with somebody from Brazil who wants me on radio, and she says to me, will you please talk about Brazil's economy and history? And I said, well, now I've got to do some homework. I don't know that much about Brazil, but charts are charts. Let's face facts. And the point is, we are all in this together. there are no more boundaries. There's no more line in the sand and you live on that side, I live on this side. What you do upstream is going to affect my drinking water. And that's exactly where we're at now. So as we move closer to what could be our salvation or our demise, it gets more and more difficult to hide your head in the sand. So my hope and prayers, I have many friends live in Texas. One of them is a doctor in southern Texas. He told me that the hospitals down there have no heat, they have no water, they have no electricity. So they are rushing to try and find places to bring the patients, especially those who are on dialysis or other life retaining machinery. They don't know what they're going to do. I have a lot of friends in Austin where they told me, one of my friends told me that they've been collecting snow and they've been bringing it into the bathrooms and dumping it into, closed bathtubs so they have water, at least for the bathroom use. I don't know if they're drinking the water. I hope they're careful if they are. But that's how bad it got overnight in a matter of 2 days. And still, there are politicians and there are people in power who refuse to believe it. Oh, no, it has nothing to do with that. One senator came out and said, the problem is renewable energy in Texas. That's why we're having a problem, because windmills don't turn when it's cold, and it's absolute nonsense. First of all, Texas, I think somewhere around 7% of Texas's energy comes from renewables. Second of all, windmills do turn in the winter. They're generated by their own electricity and they move anyway. So these are the issues we're dealing with. Some of it has to do with denial. Some of it has to do with short-sightedness. And a lot of it has to do with greed. Hey, my stocks went up. I don't care if the rest of the world's, well, you're part of the rest of the world. So eventually that's going to catch up to you. Anyway, so that to dwarf a tall tale, as my father used to say, I believe that the Pluto return in America and Pluto continuing in Capricorn for the whole world represents the period when push comes to shove. And we will be talking about this several more times, and everybody's going to have their point of view and their perspective. And I'm looking forward to hearing everybody else's in these panels as well. But there is a way out. There's an old joke. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is one, but the light bulb has to really want to change. So if we are willing to make the changes that are necessary, and we are willing to give up a little of something in exchange for something bigger, then I think we can make this happen. If not, well, that's free will. Anyway, thank you all very much for allowing me this time to present. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Daniel, if that's correct.
Thank you, Mitchell. That was really an amazing perspective, really illuminating. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
All right, let me share my screen. So I'm going to take us down a different path here today. I use a chart that really is different than what most other astrologers are working with. And it's not that I think that one chart is right and the other charts are wrong. I think they actually all have validity. They all have a lot of information that they can provide. It's just that, in my opinion, since I've been working with this chart, it has been quite informative. So that we're going to go down that road together today. So the basis of it, and I really don't have a lot of time to get into the why I've chosen this chart, but this is the historical support for it. Late in the morning of July the 6th on 1775, the Second Continental Congress passed an act to bear arms against Great Britain. So is it not true that when you declare war against your mother country, by default, you sever all economic and political connections? So on July 6, 1775, the 13 American colonies ceased to be colonies of Great Britain, and they became a sovereign and independent nation. And below here, you see, this is the actual record of it in the journals of the Continental Congress. And what is unique about this chart, it's the only one that actually has any kind of historical validation that it actually makes sense historically, but that's a whole other discussion that we don't need to get into. So in EA, when we cast a chart for an individual, the goal is, to understand the context of the individual's life rather than apply, some cookbook interpretation, and to correlate the chart to the actual life experiences of the individual. And the same method holds true for the mundane astrology of a nation. And that's how I'm going to work with it today. So I want to briefly review the context of the United States. There were three major thought streams that permeated the early days of the American colonies, plus one ancient economic institution that was inherited. They're all inherited from the past. Puritanism, which migrated from Northern Europe, Catholicism, which was brought by the Spanish and Portuguese explorers, Freemasonry, which actually had its roots in the guilds of the Middle Ages, though it was not political in those days or spiritual, and slavery. Puritanism taught that God directs all things by exercise of his will, and the righteous must swear to his, not her, covenant. And fire and brimstone were the punishment for failure to adhere to that covenant. And human beings, especially women, were often portrayed as depraved sinners and witches and were burned at the stake. And this thought stream is still very active in the United States, and it's deeply embedded in the religious right. The Spanish conquistadors were professional soldiers of fortune, looking for gold in indigenous cultures of the New World, and they were acting in service to the church and for Spain. But they used modern weapons, firearms, and cavalry against spears and bows and arrows. But in truth, the victories were really facilitated by the European diseases for which the indigenous people had no immunity. Religious missionaries accompanied the soldiers as well, converting the tribes to European religious beliefs and to their way of thinking. And there were also non-military occupants who were not Spanish on these ships. There were Jews seeking refuge from the Spanish Inquisition, and there were also French and Italians who accompanied the soldiers and missionaries. Freemasonry follows the teaching of gnosis, which emphasizes personal spiritual knowledge over the orthodox teachings, traditions, and the authority of the church. And it's about personal, direct, intuitive experience of God, creator or source, and expresses through the medium of symbolism and myth. The Masons built many of the important national buildings and monuments in Washington, D.C., and incorporated in them traditional occult and astrological symbolism. 9 of the 56 men that signed the Declaration of Independence and 13 of the 39 that signed the US Constitution were Masons. By the time of the American Revolution, slavery had become institutionalized. Many of the founding fathers were slave owners, including Washington and Jefferson. Slavery was the single most important component of the agrarian economy of the Southern colonies and expanded exponentially with the invention of the cotton gin. And it was not limited to the South. There were many indentured servants, individuals who could not afford their own passage to the New World, who had signed contracts with their benefactors to pay for their way across to America. The role of slavery was the single most contentious issue during the drafting of the US Constitution. Excuse me. It was swept under the table, and it precipitated what was called the Second American Revolution, or what we call the Civil War. At the time of the American Revolution, there were 500,000 slaves in the colonies. It was 20% of the population were people who were someone else's personal property. So Pluto in Capricorn is in Capricorn in the 4th house in this chart. The first American settlers were exiles and refugees who left their homeland in order to have the freedom to practice their political and spiritual beliefs. Their idealism drove them to create a new future, a destiny promised by divine intervention and intention. They brought with them memories of past trauma, persecution, and oppression, but they also brought with them patriarchy. And sadly, having lost their own homeland, they had no reluctance to expropriate the homelands of the, quote, primitive people they encountered. The conquistadors and the Puritans brought white male supremacy and their sense of God-given self-importance and intellectual superiority. Slavery did not begin in the American colonies. It came over on the Mayflower, and it was sanctioned by those who wrote the Declaration of Independence and drafted the US Constitution. We are currently at the first of 3 perfections of the US Pluto return. It occurs on February 18th. That's tomorrow. The transit of Pluto in Capricorn, conjoining 4th house US Pluto in Capricorn, is causing and will continue to cause the release of evolutionary dynamics that will precipitate dramatic and long-term changes to the structure of power in the United States. The sense of who we are, 4th house, as a nation is undergoing radical transformation. A new national authenticity driven, vested down there, driven by a commitment to what is individually and collectively sacred is emerging. In 2021, transiting Pluto will perfect the US Pluto on July 10th and again on Christmas Day of this year. And the US Pluto return has been in orb since January of 2019. And I'm going to show you the printout from SolarFire a little at the end of this so we can see it. And the Pluto to US Pluto conjunction will remain in orb through December of 2024. As the US Pluto return unfolds, crises emerge that threaten the welfare of the country and that alter the balance of power of the people at large and the institutions of government. The power and stability of the presidency itself is challenged, and the status of the United States suffers on the world stage. There's evidence of hidden agendas, covert alliances, secret enemies, and a national military posture. A new cycle begins regarding American authenticity and commitment to what is sacred, which is the Constitution. And I'm not going through all of these aspects. You see them here in blue, and you can see these are all the references and what has generated these interpretations in each of these slides. Transiting Saturn generates a polarization of partisan beliefs. Self-organizing groups form around political and religious ideologies. The shape and form of American democracy is restructured by pressures that seek to rebalance equality for all Americans. Foreign infiltration and intervention in American politics are exposed. Primary education is disrupted. A conservative shift takes place in the judicial system, and there are increased pressures on the welfare of the elderly. The transit of Jupiter to the US chart correlates to the spread of COVID-19 and to the pressures on the US court system as a result of the failed presidency of Donald Trump and a deadlocked position of the US Congress. It correlates to the disruption to the public and private education. The transit of Uranus brings sudden and chaotic disruptions to American democracy, which is also a 4th house activity. And insurrections, ideological conflict, distortions, and the media are all possible. Transiting Neptune, this is the US-Neptune opposition, which is embedded in this chart. Transiting Neptune has been in orb of an opposition to US-Neptune since April of 2020, last year. The opposition perfected in May and August, and it will perfect once more in March of this year. Neptune will remain in orb through January of 2022. The last opposition of Neptune to Neptune occurred in the years leading up to the Civil War. The Neptune opposition is causing dramatic exposure and conflict caused by increasing divisive social, political, and economic polarity. And the mutable Grand Cross, which has been in the sky since November, by transit to the US chart, overlays the transit to transit cross. Political and legal lines are drawn in the sand and are crossed. Excuse me 1 second. Transiting Eris is square to US Pluto, and it has been in orb, and this is, I use a conservative 2-degree orb since 2017. It will perfect 9 times from 2026 to 2030, and it will remain in orb until 2039. This Pluto era square to the US chart echoes and reinforces the current historic, not since the axial age, which I've spoken about many times, when Homer and Pythagoras and Lao Tzu and the great thought streams of Western civilization came on the planet in 971 BCE. In this Pluto to Eris transit, it's all embedded in these two transits, one overlaying the other. Crises erupt that compel evolutionary growth for the United States. There are traumatic stresses on the country as a whole and chaotic disruption to the general welfare of the country and the people at large, as well as pressures to the forward direction of the United States. The first quarter square occurred in 1846, and it was in orb from 1841 to 1853. There were 5 perfections between 1846 and 1848. The defining American foreign policy in the 19th century was the Monroe Doctrine, which defined the supremacy of the United States over all territories on the North American continent. It was a public policy that precipitated the annexation of all the land beyond the Mississippi River and along the Gulf Coast. In 1946, the Liberty Bell was brought to Philadelphia, and it was inscribed, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land until all the inhabitants thereof." When it was rung for the first time, it cracked. Was this an omen? Transiting Uranus squares the US Pluto and has been in orb. Oh, did I go back? Sorry. In the 1840s were the period of manifest destiny. The Western expansion of the United States, according to the belief that it was the country's right to extend from the Atlantic to the Pacific Oceans. Westward migration was accelerated by the discovery of gold in California in 1846. In 1845, Texas was annexed and became a state, as did Florida, which had been annexed earlier from Spain. And the end of the Mexican-American War brought California, Arizona, and New Mexico into the Union. Dred Scott versus Sanford was an important US Supreme Court case, and the ruling was that Negroes were not citizens. And Bloody Kansas was a very violent partisan conflict in Kansas over whether Kansas and Missouri were brought into the Union as to which one would be slave and which would be free. All of this occurred as Pluto and Aries transited the US 7th house of foreign relations, forming a crisis in action square to US Pluto, activating the American vision of manifest destiny. The transits from Pluto and Jupiter to the US chart correlate to the active pursuit of enlightened national self-interest and an idealistic national character that is unconventional, forward-thinking, community-minded, innovative, and assumes technological leadership in the world. There's a national perspective that's ahead of its time, socially and politically embedded with proselytizing religious tendencies that express a sense of moral and intellectual superiority. Americans, for the most part, believe that the American way is the only way. And it's brought forward by memories of disempowerment in the past that create strategies for control. Aggressive military action furthers national interest, preeminently driven by an emerging vision of a new national identity. There is determination to be a world leader politically, militarily, and economically, and it becomes the belief that the US is the world's police force. So I've shown that the current transits to the Revolutionary War chart correlate to the historical data from the time when the US Pluto cycle began at the time of the War of Independence from 1775 to 1783, and at the first quarter square of the US Pluto cycle. At the subsequent panels, I'm going to examine the opposition and the last quarter square. In recent days, we have witnessed dramatic upheavals through the challenging aspects to the planets and houses that correlate to the presidency, the diminished quality of the welfare of the people at large, democracy versus authoritarianism, legislative crises, public health and epidemics, militarism, hidden agendas and secret enemies, the courts, our children's welfare, religious beliefs, national ego, and insurrection. These historical events that mark the US Pluto cycle bear an undeniable resemblance to exactly what we are currently living through. Even though the Revolutionary War chart and the 1776 charts are cast for dates that are 1 year apart, the orbits of Pluto to US Pluto transits overlap for 9 years. This transit has been active since at least 2018 to 2018, perhaps earlier. And you can see here the dates. Only a year apart, but this entire body of transit is all concurrent. So when did it all begin? Was it when Uranus moved into orb of its first quarter square to Pluto in 2009? Or was it between 2012 and 2015 when these two planets of revolution and evolution respectively perfected 7 times? Or was it in 2016 with Uranus and Pluto still in orb that Donald Trump became GOP presidential candidate and was elected president of the United States? Or was it in 2017 as Pluto moved into orb of the current historically epic square to Eris that we realized that Donald J. Trump appeared more like the Antichrist than a great American statesman? Or was it in 2020 at the first perfection of Pluto and Eris as COVID emerged? Clearly, we are moving through one of the most transformative times in American history. With the exception of those born with Pluto in Cancer who lived through the Great Depression and World War II, we who came of age in the subsequent generations have been born in a bubble where color TV, men on the moon, and cell phones became the norm. It has not always been this way. Those who came before us paid dearly for the freedoms and privileges that we have enjoyed. There's not just one major astrological US event that's happening right now. Besides the US Pluto return, the US Neptune opposition, which last occurred at the time of the American Civil War, is currently unfolding. Over 600,000 American husbands, sons, and brothers died in that war. More men lost their lives in the Civil War than in all other American wars combined. At the end of the war between the states, the Union reconsolidated, but slavery did not end. It just became segregation. We are the sons and daughters dealing with the sins of the fathers. We can look to our astrological charts to divine the future, but the future is seeded and fertilized in the present. The choices we make in these defining years will be the determinant of our children's future and their children's future. In 2001, the message from the Hopi elders told us, we are the ones we have been waiting for. If not now, when? Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. That was an excellent presentation, very rich historically. Excellent. I'm going to, let's see, share my screen now as well. Let's see, do it this way. And let's see, I'm assuming you guys can see the charts there?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to a little bit, but just contextualize or riff off a little bit of what Daniel was saying there and contextualize the Pluto return within the other transits that we have been going through collectively. And, you know, the major overarching dynamic over the past decade is the Uranus square Pluto energy. And what's interesting about the United States is that it's born with Uranus in a trine to Pluto. This is a 9-degree trine from 8 Gemini to 27 Capricorn. And, you know, it fits the evolutionary technological, you know, thrust of the United States and, you know, its continual evolutionary dynamics and emancipating freedom. And maybe I'll point out real quick here how it's really fascinating that it was the Uranus return, the first Uranus return in 1861. Sorry. sorry about that, 1861. And this was the American Civil War, has been mentioned. And this was the first Uranus return for the United States, where we, instilled a new level of freedom that wasn't recognized at the birth of the nation. And it's, another fascinating correlation is that on D-Day in 1944, when we helped emancipate Europe, again, Uranus had returned to its place where we were expanding our, American freedom and democracy, in essence, to the world, helping to end the Second World War. And so I just wanted to maybe point that out to begin with as underlying context. And then if we look at just what's happened over the past 20 years or so, whoops, sorry about that. I'm just gonna go to, shoot. 08. So this was when the Lehman Brothers collapse took place. And this was the very beginning of the Uranus square Pluto that we've been going through collectively for the past 10 years or so, and past 13 years. And it's interesting that Saturn was square to Uranus, the US natal Uranus at that time, and the sudden unexpected, disruption of our institutions, our banking systems. And Pluto was beginning to oppose the United States Venus. This part of the chart, the Sun, Jupiter, Venus, is the wealth, of the United States in many ways, and Venus with money. And clearly a disruption, a sudden unexpected collapse of structures. But then, this is actually where, we began to cede the power that the United States had held since the end of World War II to China, basically, because China financed our debt for the banking collapse in the 2008 to 2011 period. And they've been on the rise since this time, where, we've been dealing with the forever wars and our financial institutions and our infrastructure is collapsing, and all sorts of economic poor decisions like the tax cuts. So we're becoming less and less powerful as the previous one world superpower. And it's interesting that, the Saturn, the T-square began this process. I mean, you could go back to 9/11, but this is another, significant point where specifically relating to our power and with money. So, and then it's interesting that right when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, Saturn was opposing natal Uranus. And interestingly, Pluto was square to natal Saturn and opposite the Sun for the United States. And Rick mentioned this, described it as like, the Plutonic underworld, the id, and kind of, or Hades, like opened up and kind of abducted the Persephone of the United States and dragged it into the underworld. And it does seem as though, just reflecting on the United States power that we have as a nation and have, implemented onto the rest of the world as becoming the world superpower and controlling different aspects of the economy and trading routes and all of these things around the world, and and coups infecting governments all over Latin America, and the way we've just abused the parts of the world, and not just abused, but it's corruption, it's manipulation, trying to exploit Pluto, trying to exploit and extract resources from the world in order for our benefit. And you can see where this is, we're so much of what we are experiencing at this moment that, in my opinion, Trump really just brought to light the Plutonic shadow of the United States. In his ascending to power, it's the, racism, the exploitation of nature, the materialistic approach, greed, misogyny, like so much of the shadow of who we are as Western people and as in the United States represents or correlates to Pluto. And so it seems as though we're in this process of a return are of the repressed part of who we are. We repress the fact that we are racist, that we have slavery and misogyny and all these, the genocide of Native Americans. I mean, and how so much of these issues have come to light, specifically, not, during the Trump presidency, but you can kind of specifically correlate it to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that we've been going through since 2017, 2018, 2019. And like this, corresponds to a confrontation with the shadow Pluto, but a confrontation with the superego, with conscience, with the moral Saturn development, Pluto, the evolutionary principle of how we are coming to account or taking to account our own rapacious history, and rather than staying in that denial, it's being brought to the surface for us to look at. And it also seems as though that we are going to no longer be the world superpower, that China's economy, and they are on the path to overtake us as the world power, and they have the desire to do so. And to be honest with you, like Trump's perspective was to retreat and to retract from world power positions. So it may be that this is the start of something, a significant transformational process, which would make complete sense just on the level of the Saturn-Pluto alignment by itself, because like World War I was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. The end of World War II, at the beginning of the Cold War, was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. You can see this, world power shifting dynamics. Then it happened again in the early 80s, with Reagan and the peak of the Cold War. And now we're in it again. And, we've kind of run the gamut of the last 30 years since the end of the Cold War. And we probably, I don't want to say right or wrong, but like we've behaved in a way that wasted many of our resources on wars and different things. And now we have a collapsing infrastructure in many ways, and not, we're not exactly sure how we're going to move into the new technological needs and still have people employed with automation and all these things. So we're in a real critical moment of how we're going to adjust to the new realities and move into the future. Now, I focus a lot on the negative potentials, but something that's really, I think, potentially very enriching and very helpful that is also taking place over the next 6 or 7 years, 8 years, is that Uranus is moving into a trine with Pluto again. So just as it was when we were born, when the United States was born, the Uranus will be moving into a trine with Pluto beginning in like 2022, 23, and tight through 25. And the reason I bring this up is because the last time Uranus was trine to Pluto was during the 1920s, when specifically it was extremely tight, when the experiments were conducted that gave us quantum mechanics. So quantum mechanics was born during the Uranus-Pluto conjunction around the turn of the century, around 1900. But it was during the trine, during the 20s, that they had developed the technology and the understanding to do the test that revealed the mysterious, unbelievable nature of reality that quantum mechanics reveals, which led to computers, magnetic resonance imaging. So much of the modern world comes out of the out of quantum theory. And so the reason I'm really hopeful about this Uranus-Pluto trine, and this Uranus will be trining the natal Pluto as well, USA natal Pluto. And what I'm excited about is the fact that, 100 years ago, we were just breasting this threshold of technological miracles. And now we're moving into a place where artificial intelligence will most likely go through a rapid evolution during the Uranus trine Pluto. And then there's also the potential for some type of free energy threshold to be crossed. The Chinese are developing fusion technology. You know, there's clearly a demand. The environmental threat is happening to, it's pushing us to recognize the need, the emergency of the situation, which will also spur innovation. So there's a lot of potential positive, transformative, evolutionary transformative power that is in potential over the next several years. So, and then also potentially on the human rights level, like so much of the Black Lives Matter evolutionary moment could also be held in that Uranus trine Pluto energy, that new rights can be, like women were given the right to vote during the Uranus trine Pluto of the 20s. So like that type of emancipatory evolutionary impulse towards more freedom, more dignity, more human rights is also very much in the picture. And then we're going to have our third Uranus return in the late 20s, 2027. So this all speaks to the potential for revolutionary, transformative energies that could bring us a new world, and an entirely new perspective on the nature of reality, and what the importance of like power, like Mitchell was so accurately reflecting the Pluto as oil. It's oil, and it's power, it's energy in as an archetypal realm. And you actually do see a lot of the energy crises with the Saturn-Pluto conjunctions and hard aspects. But as he was mentioning, but then where Uranus is trine to Pluto over the next, latter part of the decade, there's a real potential for a revolutionary, transformative breakthrough that we're really in need of. I mean, so much of the situation is reaching dire limits, and our needs for revolutionary technologies and stuff to move us beyond the limited situation that we're in. So I think that's basically what I wanted to say. And maybe if we have a discussion, we can tie in a couple of things, but maybe I'll pass it back to Mitchell here. Let's see. Great. Did you get it?
Okay. Chad, that was great. Daniel, terrific presentations, both of you. I'm just great perspective, really. Both of you, everybody. I mean, it's just, that's what I love about these. I'll tell you one thing though, Chad. Uranus conjunct Uranus in 2027 does give me a little pause, because every time we have that, we have a war. I'm hoping that's not the case, of course.
Right.
I did an article for Dell Horoscope a few years ago about all the hard aspects between Saturn and Pluto. Every time there was a hard aspect, it's about history, there was a war. Everybody, even Mao taking over, China, and even the Falkland Islands. I mean, every time we looked at it, there was some sort of however big or small it was.
Right.
But I definitely, especially like your positive perspective. We have to keep some faith. I mean,
Yeah.
And one more thing, I think let's open this up. Let's chat about this, all of us. One thing that I didn't mention that I wanted to, so I'll jump in here and you guys can respond to it. The Pluto rules all things that are worn out that need to be replaced. When in fact, Pluto opposed my sun on the 22 and a half degree Cancer. And while it was in opposition to my sun, besides the fact that I was thinking, if I threw myself out the window, could I possibly reach the East River? I redid my entire apartment. Many things in my life, relationships, all kinds of things that were decaying, either disappeared or they had to be rebuilt. And the infrastructure, as you mentioned, in America, and I think you both mentioned, in New York, for those of you who don't come from the East, there are two tunnels that go through under the Hudson River, the Lincoln Tunnel and the Holland Tunnel. They're both very old. Hurricane Sandy, one of them, I forget which one, was damaged almost beyond repair, but they managed to, you know, with chewing gum and sticks, hold it together. And we were supposed to have a third tunnel built. And Chris Christie, Republican governor of Jersey, refused to have it done. 30% of America's economics goes through those two tunnels. So if they collapse, we're going to have a massive, massive depression. So I'm hoping that Biden and, you know, and Congress or whatever, whoever, that they pull this together. Daniel, you got something to add here?
I just want to comment on something that Chad said. Chad, was it Rick Tarnas who talked about Hades being open? Eris is going to love this. Aaron's going to love this. We did a talk a couple of months ago, and the title of the talk was "The Gates of Hell Are Open." So that kind of resonated with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe we are at the gates of hell. Who knows? I mean, certainly what we've been through the last number of years, we were all quite aware, you know, how intense this has been the last 4 years of the previous administration, and, you know, the hopes for the incoming administration and so on. I don't know. What do you think?
Aaron, please.
There's one thing I was going to insert, and that was that the United States North Node is actually Biden's Pluto.
Yeah.
And so with Pluto coming over the North Node of the United States in the form of a president, I have a feeling, and, you know, I think intuitively and practically looking at the horoscope at the third Uranus return of the United States and the first Pluto return, that there's a lot of hope here, because what we're looking at is this Pluto return doesn't occur very often, thank goodness.
Ever.
Not
so far, anyway.
No, but archetypally, it has a lot to do with bringing the underworld into the open.
Right.
Persephone is now rising from the underworld in order to be able to bring the gifts of the gods from the underworld into the...
But Aaron, don't forget, Trump's Pluto is very close to America's North Node also.
Of course.
It's a generational thing. And
right.
While they may be two sides of the same coin, or completely, however you want to phrase it, they were both part of this transformative event that occurred.
Yeah, no, Trump really he played a big role in it, in this change.
Well, what I look at, and I did a webinar about the election before the election, because I wanted to be on. I predicted Biden, and I wanted to, you know, get my thing up there so people can say, "Oh, look at how smart he is." Trump's full moon eclipse sits right on top of America's Mars and squares its Neptune. Mars, Neptune. In fact, if I can bring this up, I don't know if you guys can see this. But Mars, Neptune in America's chart, that's our fear. That's our panic. And that's what Donald Trump used to get elected. Yeah, was the fear. I don't know where. No, I thought I had him in here. Okay, never mind.
No, it's right. You're right.
Whereas Biden's he's got Mercury on Jupiter on America's Mercury. Where Trump used fear, Biden is using optimism. Where Trump tried to cajole and push and you know, literally make us afraid of our own selves, Biden's doing just the opposite. Some of the Republican senators who went to the White House, they came out in shock. Oh my God, this man talked to us for the last 3 hours. He didn't put us down. He didn't tell us we were idiots. It's quite a change. And you know, all we can do is pray that it comes to pass, you know? Yeah.
I would just like to make the comment that to me, what has been paramount over the last 18 months or so, or maybe less, a year and a half, you know, since the beginning of 2020, that what we've experienced is sudden and unexpected. And we have to remember that even though we are prognosticators and, you know, we have our charts and we think we can, you know, ordain the future or perceive the future, you know, there's a Talmudic proverb says that man plans and God laughs.
Right.
Okay. I think that we all recognize that these transits are long term. We're all, you know, pointing out that we're looking to the late 2020s, you know, as we look forward. And we have to recognize that things are not going to unfold A, B, C, D, E, F. It's just not happening that way. It hasn't happened. It's not going to. We're going to get blindsided again. We're going to continue to experience these chaotic events that are going to knock us off balance because we need to be knocked off balance. The idea that you know, we're going to somehow get back to normalcy is not only a fallacy. I think that it's an erroneous direction. There was a really great quote from Arundhati Roy that I posted yesterday on Facebook. And the gist of it was, you know, that she said the worst thing that can happen is the return to normalcy. We cannot go back. The past is a phantom. We can only go forward, but we will not be able to go forward until we heal the shadows of the past that are holding us hostage. And all of the things that are happening in the world. Donald Trump was a homeopathic of everything that's wrong with America. And COVID has forced us back to, and with Uranus and Taurus has forced us to realize what is essential, not what we want, not what we think we can do, you know, but what we have to do. This is a choke chain mentality that there's no compromise with our direction forward. But we cannot, it's not going to be any walk in the park. And as much as we're all excited about, you know, Joe Biden, we were excited about Barack Obama, you know, and I don't want to, you know, dwell on negativity here, but we have to be realistic. We have to recognize, you know, first of all, I'm neither a vaxxer nor an anti-vaxxer. I'm not old enough to get the shot, and I don't have any underlying, you know, underlying anything underlying.
Daniel, I had COVID last April, and I strongly suggest that you get the shots.
Well,
very nasty.
That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that if everybody gets the vaccine, you know, Neptune is also collective delusion. And it's not just QAnon that's the collective delusion. There's also a collective delusion that everything's going to be fine if we all get vaccinated, and we're going to have herd immunity. Let me finish. And the, you know, the CNN just reported, you know, the numbers are down, but it's not because people are getting vaccinated. It's because everybody is following the direction of the CDC. And you know, the science is real, and I agree with you. You know, we can get sick, but it's about our immunity. It's not about getting, you know, some fix me. We live in a fix me world, Mitchell. No,
Daniel, I don't think that way. I'm sorry, you should know me by now a little bit. I don't think that way, nor do I think that there is a magic shot that's going to fix everything. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm not saying you are, but I think that it is in the field. And my concern is that when everybody gets that shot, they're going to say, "Oh, I don't need to wear my mask again. I can go to the supermarket."
But that's stupid. That's not.
Of course, it's stupid.
I don't think that way.
But that's how we got. But that's how we got here. It was stupid.
Yeah. Well, I think what got us here is stupid when people refused, when there are Republican state houses that counter the Democratic governors and say we are not going to have masks. You know, in the last pandemic, 1918, it lasted from 1918 to 1920. And they told you to do three things: wash your hands, wear a mask, and stay 6 feet away. And what people were doing then is they were taking their masks and burning them in the middle of the street and ranting and raving and having big parties. And so the virus kept coming back. And it wasn't until, and then there was a depression from 1920 to 1922. The real roaring 20s didn't begin until 1922, when the stock market ran up in this exuberant, totally fantasized Neptunian explosion, only to collapse in 1929 and then 1931 and lead to the Great Depression. So I don't disagree with you. And I don't think that the vaccine is going to cure everything. And I don't think wearing a mask is going to protect me from everything. I had the virus once. They don't know if I can get it again. They don't know if these shots work against the new variants. They don't know anything. We're all shooting in the dark. But if we would pay attention and take it a little more seriously.
Right.
I mean, I have fights in Starbucks. The kid hands me the coffee with his hand on top of the cup like this. I said to him, really? In the middle of a pandemic? And then he got mad at me and we had a big to-do. And I said, I'm never walking in this store again.
This is Saturn Uranus. This is the individual versus the consensus. It's exactly what it is.
I suppose. But we have Saturn Uranus every few years. It's not that uncommon an aspect. There's a hard aspect to it every 6 or 7 years. So it's deeper than that. It's what we're here to talk about. Pluto. It's deeper. Pluto is infection too. I mean, Neptune rules the actual infections, but Pluto rules the digging out of the infection. And whether you consider the infection racism and anti-Semitism and xenophobia and all the rest of this, or you consider it the actual pathogen of COVID, it's still all part of the same. And again, that's why we're all sitting here talking, because we understand that we've got to dig out what's really happening. And what you guys said before, I agree with 100%. People don't change until they're in pain.
Right.
And our society has to get worse before it's going to get better.
Thank you.
So I agree with that 100%. And to an offshoot of the quote that you said before, attributed to Voltaire, although there's some question as to whether it was his or not. God is a comedian playing to an audience too afraid to laugh. Whether it was his or Mark Twain's or anybody else's, the point is that it makes sense. We are afraid to go to the next step, and so we hide. No, I don't want to change. I don't want to change.
That's human nature. That's our moon. We want security. We want familiarity. That's the whole thing. That's
unless you have the moon in a fire sign.
I do have the moon in a fire sign.
So do I.
But it's growth through crisis. We don't grow until we have to. Pluto takes us. Pluto is the evolutionary engine that keeps us moving forward. Evolution is not a theory; it's a fact. Right. And Pluto takes us to the wall that represents the challenge that we refuse or resist to overcome. And Pluto says,
right. Most changes in our society aren't revolutionary; they are evolutionary.
Right.
And they take a generation to. Right. So we've got a long way to go. Look, whichever chart of America you use, we're still dealing with Pluto for at least the next 4 or 5 years, maybe longer, depending on which style of astrology you use. Some extend it out for another 8 years.
I know, but we can't strip the planets away from each other. Personally, I think that the pandemic is Neptune. I think it's the Plutonian influence that is bringing all that to the surface.
Neptune rules all infectious diseases. Right. In 1918, in March, Neptune was conjunct Saturn, and the pandemic that began supposedly in Kansas and was limited. And so they sent the troops over, and it incubated in the trenches. And then in 1918, in October, November, when they started sending them back, now Saturn was in opposition to Uranus. And so the pandemic completely exploded. While Neptune was the initiator of the pandemic, there were other aspects that were societal.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
When it first started here, we had Neptune in sextile to Jupiter in March. And then after a while, people, we all do our shtick, and I went and did my lectures, and I said, we're going to have a second wave. There's no question about it in the fall. Why? Because Saturn's going to square Uranus. The same way that in 1918, Saturn opposed Uranus. The Neptune sets off the pathogen, but the Saturn-Uranus creates that conflict, and which we all are very familiar with. So that's where we are, and it's going to take. It's not going to happen, and Joe Biden isn't going to be able to snap his fingers. And I'm glad that he's talking to senators. Do I think that all the Republican senators are going to suddenly kowtow to him? Oh, please, I mean, I don't think any of us are that stupid. Right. But we do realize, I think, and Aaron, to get to your point earlier, my feeling is that where Trump set off fear, Biden is setting off some optimism. Again, Daniel, I don't disagree with you. It's not going to just suddenly. But I'd rather have that optimism. Chad, you also pointed out, it's not going to happen with a snap of the fingers.
Yeah, the bottom line too is that someone could come along who's saner and more intelligent than Donald Trump and coalesce.
Looks good in a suit and is just as big an asshole.
Those 70 million people who voted for him, they're still out there. The people who ransacked the Capitol just went home, but they didn't change their ideology. They're all out there, and it's far from over.
You got 360 million guns in the hands of Americans. There's an old saying: if you give a loaded gun to a child and he points it at you, who's to blame? So if we don't deal with the gun situation, this isn't the Second Amendment. This isn't allowing a pistol to protect yourself if your family's being invaded. This is armed militias with thousands with rocket launchers and please, So all of this.
But that's exactly what they're afraid of, is the government coming to take their weapons. So
I understand.
I
get that. And well, Canada has recently passed a law. You're not allowed to have a gun that holds more than 5 bullets at a time.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what we're talking about is, like we've mentioned, the Saturn square Uranus energy we're going to have to work with for the next 3 years. And, so much of it seems the trajectory is we'll be arguing over the big lie, and, how many millions of people continue to hold on to that narrative, and what the trajectory of that narrative does 2022, but specifically to 2024, because, the historical, connections to this are like was it the Reichstag fire or the broken glass, but or actually it's the end of World War I, where the Germans lied to themselves and said that the Jews had been the responsible, that the war was ended, and they actually didn't lose World War I. And so there
are many who believe, though, that if they hadn't pushed Germany to the point,
right, of course, that as well, that is, and that's part of that narrative. But the thing is that, like, if this narrative takes hold and stays entrenched in a large portion of the American psyche, we will go to some form of battle. I don't know if it'll become guns in the streets.
I'm sure that you're reading the same stuff I'm reading and watching the same shows and whatnot. Most of the Republican states are now passing the most restrictive voting laws ever.
Exactly.
And that's going to be a battle day after day after day in the courts and everywhere else. And they're not stupid. I think they're weird, but they're smart, and they understand what you want. You want to go ahead. Joe Biden, go have a good time. We're going to take care of it in the back. We're going to do it like we always do.
But in the meantime, the guns are already in the streets.
Of course.
Right. It is really concerning to me that so many of the local Republican parties are censoring and they're binding together around the big lie, and that is genuinely concerning. That is not being driven by the senators.
In the House of Representatives. I mean, look, I thought when I saw what happened in Sandy Hook, and it didn't move the needle at all, and I saw what happened in Las Vegas, and it didn't move the needle at all. But I'm sitting here and watching them attack Congress. I said, maybe this will move the needle. Not at all. Not at all.
And it was the very people who were sitting there who almost got attacked.
Right. Yeah. Just deeply, deeply concerning issues there, for sure.
No one ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American public. It's a misquote to Mankiewicz from the 40s, but I think he said American taste, but the point is taken, And I don't know what to say, honestly. I try to be an optimist. I really do. I got a sage moon, a sage rising. I'm always looking to the far side. But boy, I don't know about you guys. There are times when I can't sleep. And I'm not sure if it's Donald Trump who's keeping me awake, or my 95-year-old mother, or whatever it is. But there's an angst in our culture. And again, Pluto. I mean, that is what we're here to talk about. I always feel that that's Pluto that's saying, hey, wake up, come on. You know, I mean, all the planets have their energy, and of course, the planets aren't doing anything to us. I'm sitting on a couch next to you. I don't think that that Saturn's pulling you differently than it's pulling me. But that's Pluto. If we don't dig out that infection, if we don't get deep and remove it and fix it and make it, more logical, for lack of a better term, I don't know what's going to happen to this country. And with Uranus coming back to Uranus in 27, that's what frightens me. Because that was great. I love that. That was great. That's exactly right. And Uranus, look, that's another reason why I like the chart, the Sibley chart, because Uranus, in my opinion, only is near the 7th house cusp. It's not near the ascendant with the Gemini rising. Because we don't change our face, we change our partners. Germany and Japan, we had a little problem with them. I don't know if you heard about it. And then they became our biggest friends. And that's Uranus near the 7th house, I feel. Anyway. Okay, anything else, you guys? Aaron, you got something to add here?
You're just bringing up so much of the archetypal aspect of what's going on. And, I'm not going to take up a lot of time because it's not my panel, but it seems that Pluto is actually taking us in its return into the underworld in order to actually rise again in the spring with Persephone in the psychological, archetypal, sort of mythological viewpoint. So Pluto is a great attractor, big attractor. And when he's involved in something this major, especially with, it being on the North Node, Pluto and the South Node together in the United States.
But America's gotten old.
Yeah.
And it needs to rejuvenate itself. Yeah. And that's Pluto.
I think
it's the 8th house of rejuvenation. That's why I always find that Scorpio sometimes gets a bum rap in astrology. And I'm not an astrological bigot. I don't believe in bigotry of any sort. They're perfect, Scorpio. I have many friends. My father was a Scorpio. And it's like, oh, Scorpio. Yeah. Scorpio is rejuvenation. It's the 8th house. It brings us back to life. It doesn't take away. It takes away what's worn out and gives us something new. Well, let's hope that that's what Pluto can do. But it's not going to be easy. We're going to go through some, as you say, the gates of hell.
Yeah. Let's also expand the mythology a little bit, Aaron. It was Hermes who could enter the underworld without danger, without any harm.
Yes, he was the one that
Hermes can move between the dimensions, and our Mercury can do the same thing. Our Mercury can go into our own shadows and come out unharmed. And so it's our cognitive skills, it's our intelligence, it's our communication, it's our ability to reach out to others and find community that really is going to be our resolution.
But isn't that what's frightening about the right-wing media? They're using these. They're using these skills. They're creating their own networks, their own truth, so to speak.
Well, you're bringing up another whole issue, which is money in politics. And we're talking about Citizens United and America First. There's millions of dollars getting poured into these elections. It's behind all these GOP candidates. And one of the major things that has to happen, besides the gun control, is getting money out of politics.
Not going to happen with the Supreme Court, not in my opinion. But I think there are going to be a couple of Supreme Court justices who are going to leave us over the next few years. Some of them are, again, I don't want to make this political, but on that side of the aisle, so to speak. And I think we may see a restructuring of the Supreme Court in ways that we hadn't considered. That's the only way it's going to change. Because Congress, unless the Democrats, unless we do away with the filibuster, which obviously should have been done away with, should never have been brought up to begin with. It's simply a slavery, tactic. But if we don't do away with that, and the Democrats are not able to get a supermajority, then we're going to keep hitting these blocks. We're going to keep hitting these walls.
Right.
Well, I hope our loss of innocence isn't permanent. Let's put it that way.
Well, guys, this was great. I had a great time.
Excellent.
And I
Likewise.
think that Linda wants us to wind this down. So I hope you're all well and stay healthy and stay warm. And to keep in touch. If anybody wants to say hi, you know, I'm always here. I'm easy to find. So
Likewise.
thank you all of you.
Yes.
It was great.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
See you at the next.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Mitchell.
Thank you,
Aaron.
Daniel, Chad,
Thanks, Linda.
Ellen, and Linda.
Especially
Okay,
Linda.
guys.
Yeah, especially Linda.